The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. 2 shipping lanes cut through it. Each lane stretches barely 2 miles across. Through this sliver of water, roughly 20% of the world's oil moves every single day. Tankers loaded with crude from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE all funnel through this gap before reaching open ocean. Now a United States Navy carrier strike group sits at the mouth of that passage. Destroyers hold position in a staggered picket line. Their radar arrays rotate without pause. Helicopters cycle off flight decks every 40 minutes, scanning the surface for fast attack craft. Iran watches from the northern shore, fewer than 40 miles away. Its coastal defense batteries are manned. Its Revolutionary Guard Navy has dispersed dozens of small boats into hidden coves along the coastline, and the question that now hangs over every barrel of oil, every insurance policy on every supertanker, every diplomatic back channel between Washington and Tehran is simple. What happens if someone flinches first? That question has no comfortable answer, because the forces now facing each other across this choke point are not postured for de-escalation. They are postured for contact. And in a waterway this narrow, with this many weapons pointed inward, contact does not stay limited for long. To understand why this moment carries the weight it does, you need to understand the geography that created it. The Strait of Hormuz separates Iran to the north from Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south. It connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and then to the Arabian Sea beyond. Every tanker leaving the oil-producing states of the Gulf must pass through it. There is no alternative route for most of that crude. Saudi Arabia operates the East-West pipeline, which can move some oil to the Red Sea coast, but its capacity covers only a fraction of total exports. The UAE has a pipeline bypassing the strait to the port of Fujairah, but again, this handles limited volume. For the vast majority of Gulf oil, the strait is the only door. Iran has understood this leverage for decades. Its entire naval strategy in the Persian Gulf revolves around the ability to threaten, disrupt, or close the strait. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, a force separate from Iran's conventional navy, operates specifically for this mission, and it fields hundreds of small fast-attack craft armed with rockets, machine guns, and in some cases, anti-ship cruise missiles. These boats are designed to swarm larger vessels. They train in the shallow waters near Iranian islands like Abu Musa, Greater Tumb, and Lesser Tumb, all of which sit directly along or near the shipping lanes. Iran has also placed anti-ship missile batteries on these islands. The Noor missile, a variant of the Chinese C-802, has a range exceeding 120 kilometers. Newer systems, including the Gator and the Qadir, extend that range further. These are not theoretical assets. They are deployed, tested, and pointed at the lanes. Iran's submarine force adds another dimension. The Islamic Republic operates 3 Russian-built Kilo-class submarines. These are diesel-electric boats, and are quiet when running on battery power and capable of laying mines or firing torpedoes in the shallow, acoustically cluttered waters of the Gulf. Iran also fields a fleet of midget submarines, including the Ghadir class, which are small enough to operate in coastal shallows, where larger submarines cannot maneuver. In a conflict scenario, these boats would attempt to mine the shipping lanes and ambush warships moving through the strait. The threat is real. Even the possibility of a single mine forces tankers to halt. Insurance premiums spike. Shipping companies reroute. The oil price moves before a single shot is fired. On the American side, the assets in play reflect the seriousness of the posture. The carrier strike group currently positioned near the strait is built around a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. This ship carries an air wing of more than 60 aircraft, including FA-18E and FA-18F Super Hornets, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare jets, and E-2D Advanced Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft. The Hawkeyes are critical. They fly high above the fleet and scan hundreds of miles in every direction, tracking air and surface contacts and feeding data back to the warships below. Around the carrier, Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers form a defensive ring. These destroyers carry the Aegis Combat System, one of the most advanced naval warfare suites in the world. Each destroyer holds up to 96 vertical launch cells loaded with a mix of standard missile variants for air defense, Tomahawk cruise missiles for land attack, and anti-submarine rockets. A Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser likely accompanies them, adding another 100-plus launch cells to the formation. Beneath the surface, at least one Los Angeles-class or Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine operates in support, though its exact position is never disclosed. The trigger for the current escalation did not arrive as a single dramatic event. It built through a sequence of moves over recent weeks, each one narrowing the space for retreat. Iranian fastboats increased their harassment of commercial shipping near the strait. On multiple occasions, IRGC Navy vessels approached tankers at high speed, circling them, training weapons, and demanding they alter course. The U.S. Navy responded by assigning destroyer escorts to transit convoys. Then Iran conducted a large-scale naval exercise in the Gulf, by practicing mine-laying and fast boat-swarming tactics in full view of American surveillance aircraft. Washington read this as a signal. The Pentagon ordered the carrier strike group to reposition closer to the strait's entrance. Iran's defense ministry issued a public statement declaring that any foreign naval force attempting to dominate the strait would face a decisive response. Within 72 hours, both sides had moved from posturing to positioning. The first visible shift came when American destroyers began running continuous patrols directly inside the strait's traffic separation scheme. Normally, U.S. warships transit the strait but do not hold station within it. Holding position inside the strait itself sends a different message. It says the U.S. Navy intends to guarantee free passage physically, not just rhetorically. Its Iranian coastal radar installations tracked every movement. Communications intercepts, monitored by both sides, showed a spike in encrypted traffic between IRGC Navy bases at Bandar Abbas, Jask, and the island garrisons. Patrol boat activity along the Iranian coast doubled within 48 hours. Fishermen reported being told to stay in port. This is a signature indicator. When Iran clears civilian traffic from coastal waters, it is preparing those waters for military use. Overhead, American P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft began flying continuous orbits above the Gulf of Oman. These aircraft carry advanced radar, sonobuoys for submarine detection, and Harpoon anti-ship missiles. Their presence signals that the U.S. is actively hunting for Iranian submarine activity outside the strait. MQ-9 Reaper drones, operating from bases likely in the UAE or Oman, added persistent surveillance over the Iranian coastline. Every missile launcher, every boat pen, every fuel depot along Iran's southern shore is now under constant watch. Iran knows this. It responds by activating mobile missile launchers, vehicles that can fire and relocate before a retaliatory strike arrives. Satellite imagery, the kind monitored by both government analysts and open-source intelligence communities, has shown these launchers moving out of their garrisons and dispersing along the coast. This is not routine. This is preparation. The operational pressure now extends beyond the military sphere. Insurance companies that underwrite tanker voyages through the strait have begun reassessing risk premiums. When premiums rise, shipping costs rise. When shipping costs rise, as oil prices rise. This mechanism is already in motion. Brent crude futures climbed sharply in the days following the carrier group's repositioning. Asian markets, which depend most heavily on Gulf oil imports, reacted first. Japan, South Korea, India, and China all receive massive volumes of crude through the strait. A sustained disruption, even a partial one, would force these economies to draw down strategic reserves or seek alternative suppliers at higher cost. The economic pressure radiates outward from the choke point like a shockwave, touching every nation that burns oil. Inside the strait, the near-trigger moment comes not from a policy decision, but from proximity. When warships from hostile nations operate within visual range of each other in confined waters, the margin for miscalculation compresses to almost nothing. And a radar lock held 2 seconds too long. A fast boat that approaches 50 meters closer than the established warning threshold. A helicopter that overflies an Iranian vessel at low altitude. Any one of these incidents can cascade. In 1988, the USS Vincennes shot down Iran Air Flight 655 in these same waters, killing 290 civilians after misidentifying the Airbus A300 as an attacking F-14 Tomcat. The conditions that produced that tragedy, high tension, close proximity, rapid decision cycles, are present again now. American commanders in the Gulf operate under standing rules of engagement that permit defensive action against demonstrated hostile intent. The definition of hostile intent in a waterway this congested requires judgment calls made in seconds. An IRGC fast boat accelerating toward a destroyer at 40 knots might be conducting harassment Or it might be executing a suicide attack like the one that struck the USS Cole in Yemen in 2000. The commanding officer on that destroyer has moments to decide. Fire too early, and the incident becomes an act of aggression that Iran uses to justify broader retaliation. Fire too late, and American sailors die. This calculus plays out every hour of every patrol in the Strait right now. Iran's own forces face a mirror version of this dilemma. IRGC commanders along the coast must balance the political directive to project strength against the operational reality that engaging American warships directly would invite a response they cannot survive conventionally. Iran's strategic deterrence relies on asymmetry, using mines, swarm tactics, and missile saturation to inflict unacceptable costs rather than winning a force-on-force engagement. But asymmetric warfare requires a deliberate trigger. An accidental exchange, started by a nervous boat captain or a malfunctioning radar system, removes the element of choice. It forces escalation on a timeline neither side controls. The military consequences of a shooting exchange in the Strait would be immediate and severe. American forces would move to suppress Iranian coastal missile batteries within the first hours. Tomahawk strikes from destroyers and submarines would target known launcher positions, radar sites, and command nodes along the southern Iranian coast. The carrier's air wing would establish air superiority over the Gulf, engaging any Iranian aircraft that lift off from bases at Bandar Abbas or Bushehr. Iran's Air Force, equipped primarily with aging F-4 Phantoms, F-5 Tigers, and a small number of F-14 Tomcats maintained with improvised parts, would not survive long against Super Hornets backed by Growler jamming and Hawkeye surveillance. The air battle would be short. The missile battle on the surface would be more dangerous. Iran's dispersed mobile launchers are difficult to find and destroy before they fire. A salvo of Noor or Ghadr missiles aimed at a destroyer or worse, at a tanker, could strike before countermeasures engage. Aegis is designed to handle exactly this scenario, but no defense system is perfect, especially in a cluttered coastal environment. The diplomatic consequences would unfold on a parallel track, slower but no less volatile. Iran would appeal to the United Nations, so framing any American military action as aggression against a sovereign state. Russia and China, both of which maintain complex relationships with Tehran, would face pressure to respond. Russia, already engaged in its own confrontation with the West, might see an opportunity to open a second front of geopolitical pressure. China, the largest single importer of Iranian oil, would face a direct economic threat. Beijing's reaction would be measured in public and furious in private. Diplomatic channels between Washington and Beijing would strain under the weight of energy security concerns layered on top of existing tensions over Taiwan and trade. The economic consequences are perhaps the most far-reaching. A sustained closure of the Strait of Hormuz, even for a matter of weeks, would remove roughly 17 to 20 million barrels of oil per day from global supply. No combination of strategic reserves, alternative pipelines, or emergency production increases can replace that volume quickly. Oil prices would not merely rise. They would spike to levels that trigger demand destruction, meaning economic activity slows because energy becomes too expensive. Transportation costs would surge. Manufacturing input prices would climb. Inflation, already a concern in most major economies, would accelerate. Central banks would face impossible choices between raising interest rates to fight inflation and cutting them to prevent recession. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a maritime choke point. It is a valve on the global economy. And right now, two armed forces are wrestling over who controls it. The hidden truth beneath the surface of this confrontation is that neither side wants the war they are both preparing for. Washington's objective is not to fight Iran in the Gulf. It is to demonstrate that Iran cannot use the threat of closure as leverage in broader negotiations over its nuclear program, its regional proxy network, and its missile development. The carrier group is a message written in steel. The strait stays open. Iran's objective is not to close the strait permanently. Doing so would devastate its own economy, since Iran also exports oil through the passage. Tehran's goal is to establish that any attempt to strangle Iran economically through sanctions or military pressure carries a price tag that Washington and its allies cannot afford. The fast boats, the mines, the coastal missiles are a countermessage. The cost of confrontation is higher than you think. This mutual logic of deterrence has worked before. It maintained a tense but stable equilibrium in the Gulf for years. What makes the current moment different is the erosion of the buffers that once kept the system stable. Communication channels between Washington and Tehran are thinner than they have been in years. Intermediaries who once carried messages, European diplomats, Omani back channels, have less access and less influence. The IRGC's hardline faction has gained internal power, reducing the space for pragmatic calculation within Iran's security establishment. And the American political environment rewards toughness over restraint, making it difficult for any administration to de-escalate without appearing weak. The structural conditions for miscalculation are stronger than they have been in a generation. The timeline ahead is measured in days and decisions, not months and strategies. If both sides hold their current positions without further provocation, the tension may plateau at a high but survivable level. Tankers continue transiting under escort. Insurance premiums stay elevated but manageable. Oil prices remain high but below crisis thresholds. This is the best-case outcome, and it requires both sides to exercise perfect discipline in an environment designed to erode it. The worst-case outcome begins with a single incident. A mine detonates under a tanker hull. A fast boat crosses the red line. A missile launches, whether by order or by error. Once the first weapon fires in the Strait of Hormuz, the escalation ladder has no easy rungs to step back down. Every military planner on both sides knows this. Every diplomat working the back channels knows this. Every oil trader watching the futures curve knows this. And the strait sits there, 21 miles wide, 2 lanes, 2 miles each. 20% of the world's oil. A carrier strike group on one side, coastal missile batteries on the other, helicopters in the air, submarines beneath the surface, fast boats in hidden coves, radar sweeping, radios crackling with encrypted traffic. The narrowest and most consequential waterway on Earth, waiting to see which side blinks and what happens if neither one does.